Saturday View with Ronan Berry. With thanks to Lumcloon Energy, pioneering innovation, powering progress. LumcloonEnergy.com. Call 0818 300 103. Text or WhatsApp your Saturday View to 083 3010 103.
Hello and a very good morning to you all on what is a very wet and windy Saturday morning. Hopefully it's dying down a little bit out there across the Midlands. But if you have been affected, let me know. If there is an issue on a roadway somewhere that you think people should know about, please let us know. 083 3010 103. Text and WhatsApp number, or you can give us a call on 0818 300 103. We've had some listeners tell us that there is significant flooding on the road between Clonaslee and Gurteen. So if you're travelling in that area, keep an eye out for that. But likewise, if there's an incident or something we need to know about anywhere around the Midlands, please let us know and we'll get that message out there. Coming up on the show this morning, we'll continue our election one-to-ones, given now that we are less than a week away from the opening of polls in the 2024 general election. We'll also hear from industry too around the manifestos that have been produced over the last week, the promises that are being made, and look at what really needs to change for different businesses. So we'll look again closely at the hospitality sector. Much talk about the VAT rate. And all we're hearing is 9, 13.5, 11, no, let's change this, let's do that. Or we weren't allowed to change that. We wanted to do this, but they wouldn't let us. What does it mean at the end of the day for businesses? Well, the Restaurants Association has produced a manifesto which goes through all the kind of stated goals and aims of all the various political parties, and we'll look at that with a hospitality owner and see, does it make sense, and is there something in there that they would vote for in terms of the next government? Also, we'll look at it from a housing perspective, and I'll be speaking to the CEO of the Institute of Professional Auctioneers and Valuers, again to look at what has been put on the table so far, look at the numbers and the promises around housing and see what can actually be delivered and really what has to change. And we often speak about that first 100 days of a new government. What has to happen within the first 100 days of the next government being set up to alleviate people's concerns and to try to alleviate the crisis that is building there in terms of housing. Before we touch on all that, real thing that's dominating the papers today, and the pictures on the front pages of all the papers refers to the recent court victory as the Irish Independent States for Nikita Hand against Conor McGregor. And headlines speak for themselves, quoting Miss Hand saying, "Speak up and keep fighting," says survivor of the McGregor attack. Miss Hand, who accused a mixed martial arts fighter of raping her in a Dublin hotel, was awarded almost 250,000 damages in the civil case yesterday. And Dublin Race Crisis Centre said it strikes an important blow to toxic layer surrounding society's views of sexual violence, and indeed calls to the rape crisis helplines and indeed to domestic violence services have more than doubled apparently particularly in the last week of that trial in Dublin. But that, and I suppose we've lots more to talk about on the show this morning. And I mentioned how we're going to continue our round of election one-to-ones where we invite the candidates from the three constituencies, Laois, Offaly and Longford Westmeath, to come on between Midlands Today and Saturday View. We've a 10-minute time cap on them as well, to give people a chance to just introduce themselves or reintroduce themselves, tell people what you're all about and ultimately why people might vote for you. My first guest this morning is an independent candidate in Laois, and Elaine Mullally is well known to people, being an activist in the area. She's from Portarlington. She's the owner of Clown Around Play Centre in the town, and was quite vocal over the years, particularly on the issue of insurance and rising insurance premiums and the impact that had on small businesses. There are a number of issues that she will speak about. She's going to put them to you now very, very shortly. But suppose to begin, I'd like to welcome Elaine to the show this morning. Good morning, Elaine.
Good morning, Ronan. Thank you so much for having me on.
Not all, hopefully all is well around Portarlington after the storm last night. But I suppose this general election, Elaine, there are more independent candidates running than ever before. 171 of the 685 candidates nationally are independents. You are claiming you're going to be a very strong voice for County Laois. But I suppose to begin, just to have ultimate clarity for people, you are a founder member of Independent Ireland, a party that you left about 6 months ago, was it?
Yes, I've left it about 4 months, and the whole idea of Independent Ireland was to form a party for independence. So there were independent candidates basically that we brought in. So yeah, I mean there is a huge rise in independence, and I think that, I'm hoping that people do the research beforehand just to check and see that the person is genuinely authentic and independent, and they're not necessarily have come from a party for whatever reasons they may have left. So, yeah, I'm out there, and I've been out canvassing. I had public meetings in September, 7 public meetings across the county. They were very successful and very well attended. From that, I got my list of priorities together, and I've been canvassing basically about 11 weeks at this stage. So I've practically all of the county covered at this point in time.
On your website, you have a question, why am I standing for election? And your answer is, in recent years, that you've become deeply disillusioned with the Irish political system. Can you expand on that for me, please?
Yeah, I would have contacted TDs over the years by email, by phone, and in many cases they just didn't even bother replying. So I feel that there's a huge disconnection between the political parties and politicians in general and the people on the ground. I believe they have stopped listening to us. I believe, they get elected and then they go into the Dáil, they're like they're in the ivory tower and they're looking down on people. And I don't believe that's a good way to run politics, to be totally honest. I think that if people utilise their vote and go out and vote for people, then they should be represented and their voice should be heard. And that's very much the campaign I've run, and it's very much the politician I hope to become. I will be working with the people the whole way through my term. I will not be disappearing or playing hide and seek like some of the others have done over the years. So that sparked me. I'm sure at some point in history, politicians did represent the people. So I think that we need to go back to that. I think that's what politics should be about, and that's exactly what I plan on doing.
If you are successful in the election, would you have any groupings or parties that you'd see yourself naturally aligned with then, in terms of trying to have that influence as an independent TD?
To be totally honest, Ronan, until we go through the election, until we see who comes out the other side, obviously I would sit down and speak to people after that time if I'm successful myself. So really that depends. That's a carrot, an apple, or the scenario of which comes first. We have to get elected first. We have to see who gets over the line, and then sit down and talk. But yes, obviously there's going to have to be some level of, you have to work with somebody to get work done. So we'll have to see who that's going to be. And hopefully that won't be too long till we find out who they are.
Yeah, I suppose if we reflect back on the last general election, it was a number of months, I think February until June, before an actual government was formed. But what are the priorities that you see, particularly from your work on the ground as a local, as a business owner in Portarlington too? What are you hearing from people, and what have you put forward as being the main priorities for yourself as a candidate?
So one of the top issues, Ronan, that came up from the public meetings and from meeting people on the doors is the lack of services for parents and families who are dealing with children with autism and special needs. And I know it's hit the papers recently, the St. Francis School and the Colby School, in relation to spaces and classes and OTs and speech therapists, etc. So there's practically every second person I've spoken to has either got a child with special needs or autism, or is a grandparent who's got a grandchild, or a family member of some description. It's actually phenomenal, the amount of people who are affected by it, and that's come up as definitely one of the top priorities. Housing, I have 2 daughters, 20 and 21, and I can't see a future in this country for them at the moment. Will things turn around? Hopefully, please God, they will. But at the moment, there's nowhere for them to live. The cost of living is too high, etc. So that's obviously another top priority. And the government's handling of immigration is huge. Lots of people are they're speaking about it openly, because I think the time has come where people are not afraid anymore. It is an issue. We need to have a grown-up conversation about it. The government should have addressed it well before now. And the biggest issue that people would have are the amount of illegal immigrants who enter this country without passports, without documentation, or what we would class welfare migrants, people who are coming here for the free stuff.
And have you evidence of that in your local area?
Well, the IPAV centre in our own town the people who own it lost their licence recently because, you know, again, if you look at the inhumane treatment of these people who are coming, there was 15 men, I believe, to a 3-bedroom house in an estate, and there was something like 70 men put into a 12-bedroom hotel, which is not fit for purpose. So, again, if people, and you know, we have to be clear here, this is a governmental issue. This is not the people who are coming here. It's not their fault. They're coming here, they think they're coming to the promised land because they've been promised all of this stuff. And then when they get here, we've seen the images of people living in tents on the canal. That's not humane. And the system is broken. The system needs a complete overhaul and a revamp, and it needs to be reviewed, and it needs to be workable, and it needs to be fair, and it's not. So,
though, a system overhaul, is that kind of your main priority there? Like, it's not the immigration itself, because, you know, we're at full employment in the country. More people, the population is growing, both through, you know, naturally growing through Irish people as well, plus the immigrants coming in. But are you seeing that as, like, is a change of policy enough to satisfy you that that's all that's needed on that issue?
Well, no, because obviously there's the infrastructure level. We're not equipped to deal with our housing is under severe pressure. Our healthcare is not functioning properly. You know, our education system, we can see there's a serious lack of classrooms, and again, going back to the special needs, there's a serious lack of services in that sector. You know, it has a knock-on for everything, Ronan. It's not just so the policy is one area, but I do believe that if that was fixed, like, we did have a fair immigration policy up until about 2022. So where we were taking in, we could manage 3,500 to 4,000 people a year. That was fair, it was manageable, and we seem to be able to cope with it. It's just that it's exploded in the last couple of years. So, you know, it's not just as simple as just click the fingers and make it work. It needs to be completely overhauled. Or maybe go back to what we did before, because it was working. So maybe that's the solution.
You reckon housing, of course, you mentioned, it referenced your own family, maybe of struggling to see nearly a future for your own children in their local area too. You have in the past objected to housing developments in Portarlington as far back as 2016.
Yeah, that's true. That would be, there was 3-storey houses that were planned to go up, and we were objecting to the quantity and the height of the houses over bungalows. Our house is already in a very wet, flooded area, so the additional pressure of the housing, with, you know, if they had have gone ahead at the time, would have caused severe pressure. However, Rowan, they did get planning permission. It did go to An Bord Pleanála. An Bord Pleanála, the inspector recommended a refusal, and An Bord Pleanála overruled the refusal and granted planning permission anyway for it. So, and there was a good few objections in. All of our neighbours are all on bungalows. We all have bungalows here, and we all struggle with our, you know, flood. Not necessarily flooding, but we do have a lot of water lying on our property, and our concern would be that we would become a floodplain if the developments had gone ahead. So, well, still, as I said, the planning permission's gone in, so it's not. We didn't. We weren't successful.
I suppose in the couple of moments we have left, Elaine, as well, some of the other key priorities there that you'd like to take us through, and I suppose put that message out to listeners as to why they might consider you with their vote next Friday.
So yeah, look, the cost of living, as I said, the childcare sector is under pressure here at the moment. Mental health is a huge issue. Having a small business myself, the VAT rate is having an impact on us. Crime, you know, the Garda stations are severely under-resourced, and we need more Gardaí, and they need to be better resourced and better looked after. Farmers, I would do my best to work with farming groups and all the farming sectors to make sure that we can save our family farms, basically, and try and encourage them to stay in. And obviously, you know, I'm from the town of Portarlington. Coláiste Íseagán is a big deal to me. I went to school in Scoilmhuire, which was before Coláiste Íseagán. And we badly need that school, and we badly need it very, very quickly. So I'll be pushing as hard as I can for the people of Portarlington on that one. And I'll be working with any single group or any, you know, organisation that wants to better the county and facilities within the county. I'm prepared to work with them. I've got a great team with me and around me, so I would like to take this opportunity to thank them for all their hard work and efforts they've put in up to this point in time. And I'm looking forward to working with them in the future.
And one group that you are involved with too is Children's Health Defence. It's an anti-vaccine group that's chaired by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., a man whose name is very much in the headlines recently, as it looks like he will be Donald Trump's most senior medical appointment in the US. Can you tell us more about Children's Health Defence, and does that impact on what you're campaigning on in terms of your general election candidacy?
No, Children's Health Defence, I was contacted by a guy in Galway who is the founder of Children's Health Defence in Ireland, and he asked if I would be able to help him organise a launch of the CHD Ireland branch, which was 2 years ago, I think. So I helped him organise that, and it was very, very successful, I have to say. But no, I haven't had any contact with Children's Health Defence since then. So that's my involvement there.
Elaine Mullally, thank you so much for that this morning. And if you are in Laois next Friday, you will see Elaine Mullally appearing as an independent candidate on your ballot paper. Time for me to take a short break. After that, we will meet another general election candidate, this time from Longford, Westmeath. And later on, we'll look at housing from an industry perspective and also look at hospitality and what it is crying out for and what it needs. I guess, I mentioned that first 100 days of government and particularly about housing. And one listener has been in touch as well and said the first 100 days, when you see a 1 year ban on private landlords buying housing stock, or first 100 days need to see a 1 year ban on planning permissions for housing costing more than €300,000. Interesting ideas. What do you think? 083 3010 103, text or WhatsApp, or 0818 300 103 by phone. Time for a quick break. Right now, though, across the Midlands, it is 13 degrees.
Saturday View, with thanks to Longcloon Energy, pioneering innovation, powering progress. LongcloonEnergy.com.
In relation to some of your texts there regarding treacherous or hazardous road conditions, another listener has rang to say that the Cush Road into Clonaslee is flooded and people are trying to just get in touch with the local council there, and they're just waiting on a response on that. So certainly the Clonaslee area already this morning seems to be suffering from significant flooding. So if you're on the roads or you're planning on travelling, just be careful and maybe check around with your neighbours and just see what the roads are actually like around there. Time for me now to continue with our general election one-to-ones. Sorca Clarke has been a Sinn Féin TD for the Longford Westmeath constituency since the 2020 general election, having served as a member of Westmeath County Council from 2014 to 2019. She's education spokesperson for Sinn Féin and was elected on the first count and is the first Sinn Féin TD to serve that constituency since Ruaidhrí Ó Brádaigh in 1957. Now, she topped the poll back in February 2020, and in her time in Leinster House, she has highlighted topics from domestic violence, access to affordable childcare, women's health issues, the plight of our disability and mental health services, and as well as honouring the Jadotville survivors. The River Shannon Management Agency Bill 2020, which he co-sponsored, is currently progressing through the Houses of the Oireachtas. And Sorca Clarke joins me now. Very good morning, Deputy Clerk.
Good morning, Ronan. How are you today?
Fantastic. Sorca, the Sinn Féin on Tuesday, I think it is this week, released its 180-page manifesto. We have 10 minutes this morning. What are the key points for you, and what are the key points that you want to get across to the people in Longford Westmeath?
Sinn Féin are committed to leading the next government, and we are committed to dealing with the crisis that is across our state, not just in Longford Westmeath. We have an absolute crisis in housing which needs to be made a priority given the scale of it, but we also need to reduce the cost of living for everyday folks. That is where our €10 a day childcare policy came into. We also need to fix our healthcare system, whether it's in a hospital or whether it's in a community care setting. Our healthcare system is broken and people deserve so much better than what they're currently getting. We also need to support our local businesses. We've seen far too many shops, be they cafes and the likes, that we may have popped in and out of over time, close over the last number of years, and that is absolutely damning. That cannot be allowed to continue. We need to support these businesses as well as continuing to attract foreign direct investment. But this will be very prominent across many of the areas that your station broadcasts to, and that's the future of the family farm. Sinn Féin has a plan to ensure that not only are farmers supported at the moment, but that farming becomes an attractive proposition for the next generation to come into. And then finally, what I would say, Ronan, is supporting our people with disability and supporting those who provide care for them.
And even on the carers there recently, I think you spoke to Will Faulkner last week about means testing for carers too, something you want to do away with.
Yes, absolutely. To our mind, and it has been an ask of those who provide care, the means tested is grossly unfair. What is happening in the current situation is where there is a financial value placed on the care somebody provides, but it's based on somebody else's earned income, and that is just wrong. Carers in their own right need to have the work that they do valued. They need to have full access to a carer's allowance because of the work that it is that they do. And we also have to look at this through the spectrum of carers save the state billions of euros every year because of what it is that they do. And they allow somebody with a disability to remain in their community, to remain in their home, and to be a part of their community, just as you and I are.
Yeah. And a part of that community, and a huge thing, and it has been an area of focus for and a discussion for many years now, and you touch on there, is childcare. And Sinn Féin is proposing to bring it down to €10 a day. And yes, for many people, it's considered like a second mortgage nearly, and pretty with a time of rising rents and childcare costs too. If you were to bring it back to €10 a day, is there not going to be a surge into a service that's already quite stretched? And given your experience, you've been sitting in the Dáil now for 5 years as an opposition TD, you've seen many finance bills, you've seen many bills go through the Dáil and the House. Financially, what are the numbers behind it, and how can you actually go about bringing about that change and a €10 a day childcare?
Well, if you want to put a financial value on it, it's 345 million a year. But part of our childcare package is also to facilitate parents to be at home with a baby for the first 52 weeks of their life. And this, and the feedback that I have certainly been getting on the doors, is hugely attractive to parents. They want this opportunity to be at home with their newborn baby for as long as possible. In one way, that will relieve pressure on a childcare system where the lowest ratio to child is actually in the first year of a baby's life. But more importantly, what we're also talking about when we reduce the cost to €10 a day is actually increasing investment into the services that are there. So SIP2 and the childcare workers, the early childhood educators have been asking for a very modest increase in the hourly pay, which Sinn Féin are committed to providing. But we're also committed to reviewing the core funding mechanism that's there. If you speak with an operator, Ronan, what they'll tell you is yes, they are a professional operation. Yes, they understand that there is forms and returns and all the rest of which comes with running a business that need to be made. But they're not feeling supported to be able to do that, and they are sending duplicates, essentially, of many forms to many different departments. So we want to review that core funding. We want to review how the actual system works in terms of returns that the operators themselves need to pay. But at the same time, by increasing the basic level of entry pay into the system, you're making childcare and early educators an attractive option for people to pursue as a career.
Education is a key thing within that to educating people for both the childcare sector. You are education spokesperson for Sinn Féin. Where your last 5 years again sitting in the Dáil watching what's been happening there, where do you see now our education system, and what sort of changes or what sort of amendments would Sinn Féin look at bringing in if you were to become a senior party in the next government?
There's one thing that struck me when I took on the education portfolios, regardless of who it is that you speak to, whether it's school leaders, principal teachers, parents or the students themselves, everybody wants to see this better, and everybody has different suggestions as to how that can happen. But that commitment to making our education system, to my mind, is absolutely astounding. Across the board, that's what people want. However, for that to actually function, we need for the parents not to be paying voluntary contributions. For our schools, we need to ensure that the grant levels are set at a level that is actually appropriate. So 35% increase in electricity alone over the last number of years. Schools simply don't have the cash in the bank to be able to meet those bills that are coming in. That's why we proposed a 20% increase in capitation for grants for secondary and for primary schools in our alternative budget. What we also proposed was something that no other party had been talking about up until this point, and that's the cost for pupils who are going to secondary schools for the devices that they are now using in school. We are proposing a standalone fund starting with dash skills for parents to be able to apply into to reduce that cost. And as schools become not reliant, but as they increase the use of technology within the classrooms, then we also need to match that with an increase in ICT grants that are there. What we also want to do, and this will speak very clearly to anybody who's listening who has a child who may avail of summer provision or what was called the July programme back in the day. We want to undo the cuts that this current government have done to that programme. We want to put back in the investment that was removed out of it. So every week last year, children who are in at social disadvantage or at the summer programme because of an additional educational need, we're getting 45 quid a week for the child to be actually able to partake in it and do something. That was cut to €30 this year. That penny pinching when it comes to special educational needs just simply needs to stop. But, and this is an issue that comes up time and time again, we view education as a right. We do not view it as a privilege. Every child has a right to an education. And what we're proposing to do is amend the EPSN Act that wasn't fully implemented. It was introduced about 20 years ago with an inclusion of person's educational bill, which would ensure that the NCSE and the Department of Education forecast properly the number of children who are going to need special education support in the next number of years. And we would then ramp up resources around that child, funding it through education, yes, but also through disability and also through health. That rights-based approach to education is something that is critically important for any child who has an additional educational need. That means that they will have an individual educational plan, which is not required at the moment, but most schools will do it. But what we want is the inspectorate to then report back to us and say, this is working, this isn't working. And where it's not working, to have a robust procedure in place so that both parents and schools can appeal a decision that was made around allocation of resources. Now, to do that also, we need to increase the number of special education teachers that we have, and we need to increase the number of SNAs. These professionals are fundamental to a child with special educational need reaching their educational outcomes. And you do have to look at this, Ronan, very clearly from the perspective of government at the moment is failing to meet the needs of the children with Sinn who are sitting in front of them. Government's own figures predict an additional 11,000 children with some form of Sinn by 2030. We have to get this right, and we have to start making those changes now.
One topic, and people are texting in about this as well, is that when it comes to all these things, investing, putting money in, let's put the Apple windfall tax aside for now. But many opposition parties have been calling out the government, saying that the model of taxation, particularly from the large multinationals or FDI companies, is unsustainable and doesn't prepare us for, no pun intended this morning, but a rainy day. How does Sinn Féin propose to sustainably fund all these initiatives it's proposing in that manifesto?
Okay, so we approach spending and taxation in a fair and in a balanced way. If you look at what government has set aside, even for existing levels of service in the last number of years, they haven't adequately funded existing levels of services. We want to allocate 2.5 billion to just stand still. That's what we need to do. That's the number that's there. Now, in terms of windfall taxes, they need to be used for capital expenditure and infrastructure at scale. So your housing, your water infrastructure, your roads, your transport systems. Because it would be remiss of me not to mention this, Ronan, but this government have actually failed to meet their own target when it comes to the National Development Plan of investing 5% of GNI. So essentially what that means is that they have underinvested by 7.6 billion between the years 2021 and 2024. That is a significant amount of money, and that needs to be invested into the wider society, because without that, we're not going to have the houses built, we're not going to have the transport infrastructure, we're not going to have businesses coming to invest, particularly in the regions, if those very, very essential things are not in place.
Yeah. And are you going to look at taxation, particularly say income tax and personal taxes on people? Will you widen tax brackets or shorten tax brackets in order to help fund all those investments?
Well, actually, what we're proposing to do is remove people, the first 45,000 of earned income or pensions from the USC over the course of 2 years, starting with 30,000 next year, where we have proposed an additional solidarity taxes on the individual income above €140,000. Now, if you look at the population, there's about 2% of people who earn over €100,000 a year. Fully enough, most of them are in the dole. So that tiny little portion, yes, we will absolutely ask anybody who's earning over €140,000 to pay a little bit extra on the element over 140,000.
Sorca, Clarke, that is our time is up for now, but thank you so much for that this morning. And if you are in the Longford Westmeath constituency, Sorca Clarke will appear on your ballot paper as a Sinn Fein candidate. Time for a quick break. After that, we're going to look at the various parties' housing policies and what they're proposing in terms of, let's call it what it is, saving small businesses in the hospitality sector. We'll look at the manifestos and get the view from industry on both sides. Back with you in just a couple of moments.
Saturday View, with thanks to Longford Energy, pioneering innovation, powering progress. LongfordEnergy.com.
We're going to take a quick look at the promises and crystal ball around housing and hospitality now for the last part of the show this morning. And at the beginning, I'm going to be joined by Pat Davitt. Pat is the CEO of IPAV, that's the Institute of Professional Auctioneers and Valuers. Pat also oversees the educational industry requirements of IPAV's 1,400 members and manages the Institute's daily affairs. In a publication on their website back in early November, not long before the general election was actually called, they spoke about the finance bill and said that there is no sign yet that housing policy is going to move from incremental or piecemeal change to a more dynamic phase. This was according to IPAV. Pat Davitt himself pointed out that the lack of supply of homes dominates the residential sector, while the green agenda is more to the fore in commercial sector. Good morning, Pat. Most of the parties, if not all the parties, have produced their manifestos at the minute. Is there anything in there at the minute that would suggest that this housing, let's call it a crisis, is going to be tackled with the new government?
Good morning, Ronan. I think obviously there's a lot of talk in all of the manifestos, and they're all talking about the number of housing that they want to build and are going to build over the next, probably up to 2030. So I suppose it's a start to at least have gone from the number of 30,000 or 33,000 up to 50,000 and 60,000, some of them are talking about. But it's probably unimaginable at the moment that you could build that many houses. But I know that it's talked about going from 33 to 40 and from little building on, little by little, year after year. But it's still quite difficult to understand that they can be able to do that.
Because some of those numbers, you're talking in excess of maybe 1,000, even 1,100 new homes a week being opened and keys being handed over. Is it a pipe dream, do you think?
Well, it's definitely a pipe dream at the moment because A, we haven't got the amount of planning permissions that we need. B, we haven't got the supply of water and electricity for those particular estates. And C, we don't seem to have the number of employees, staff to do that amount of building. So I suppose there's a couple of different things here that we need to get, I suppose, all our ducks in a row, in other words, to get the building that all of the politicians are talking about. But there are, at least, as I say, we're speaking about the numbers that we probably want or are very close to it. What was very interesting was in the Housing Committee a couple of days ago, it was a week ago or so, they were talking about the number of houses that they thought was required. That's the Department of Housing. And they also talked about the number that the Commission for Housing that was set up wanted. And they were trying to explain the difference because they said there was a difference of 100,000, where the Department was 100,000 shy of what the Commission were thinking about. And it's not really all about, how many houses we need or how many we don't need. It's a matter of getting the building up and running so as we're actually building more houses than what we're building at the moment.
And in terms of, looking at a really dynamic change or something that would be groundbreaking in terms of housing policy and how we deliver houses, what are the key things we need to look at? Like, is it the type of house? Is it the type of accommodation? The location? What are the key factors there that maybe could allow a greater number of homes to be delivered over the next decade?
Well, they talk about these modern forms of construction, and that certainly is a key to getting a lot more homes built. Modern construction is mostly houses that are built off-site and put together on-site. And those houses, as well as that, inside of those houses, they can be changed at a later date. If a household changes, that you need to change it from a bigger house to a smaller house to have maybe an apartment at one end of it for older people and that type of thing, that these can actually be done. And I think this is a real runner, I think, in the new housing of the future. But the housing that most people want to buy at the moment, certainly first-time buyers, is a house, probably something like a 3-bedroom house that is a starter home, and they want to get into that type of property. So that really is a big winner still. And as long as I'm looking at housing, which is probably 40 years now, 3-bedroom semis were exceptionally important. They're still very, very important. And they're still, I'd say, one of the favourite, if not the favourite, property for first-time buyers to buy and to own and to live in.
Some of the political parties and many in the opposition have kind of said that they would look at developing a state construction company. What would IPAV think of that? Is there any merit in that, or is it something maybe that should at least be explored?
I don't think there's much merit in it, being honest about it myself. Look, if they decided to do that, and that's up to them, I suppose, whoever gets into power. But the building authority, the HFA, is there at the moment. Housing Development Agency is there, and they're building houses at the moment. They're on site. So why, we're great in Ireland for talking about things into the future. We have the answer if we build enough homes. So I don't think a state construction company is going to be any different than where we are right now. Only waste more time getting it set up. So I don't think that's really for us. I don't think it's a runner. Some of the manifestos is very good, like some of the things that they're proposing. I think both the two major parties are proposing that they're going to extend the Help to Buy scheme to second-hand homes and the First Home scheme to second-hand homes, which we've been looking for a long, long time. And I was delighted to hear one of the leaders yesterday talking about, nearly used our words to say that there are many people across the country that there is no new housing in their towns and have to buy second-hand home. So why shouldn't they be able to get some of their tax back to buy some of these homes? And I think that's very, very good. Other parties are obviously talking about doing away with these schemes. If they want to do away with the First Home scheme altogether, that it's inflationary, and they want to do away with the First Time Buyers Grant. And being in the marketplace, if to talk to people who are in the business and in selling houses, we don't believe it's inflationary. Obviously, if two people want to buy a property and there's only one to buy, somebody is going to come out the winner. But you're looking at people buying a property rolling for 30 years or so. So, if they have to pay a little bit more in the beginning, but at least to get on the property ladder, it's very, very important. So that's what the First Home scheme does, and that's what the First Time Buyers Grant gives these people an opportunity with the bank of mum and dad to help them with deposits and to help them with additional money that they need. So I can't see how we're going to, again, get rid of those schemes and still end up with First Time buyers being able to buy a property. There's not much point in the property if the property price is if it's not going to be inflationary and it's not going to go up that little bit. What's the point when you can't get the money still to buy the property?
And that's a huge thing, affordability. I mean, the cost of living being one thing, and yes, many parties are promising, big changes on the cost of healthcare, or looking at taxation, wages, all those type of things which would help ease those costs. But the price of housing is going up as well. Even here locally in rural areas, you're hearing of people getting quotes of maybe 400 to 500,000 to build a relatively standard 3 to 4 bedroom bungalow. That in itself seems unsustainable. So will all these new promises, will they actually, things like Help to Buy, will they alleviate to a significant level those challenges that people are facing?
I don't believe they will. I believe the First Time Buyers Grant is fantastic for so many people. It's got so many people on the housing market or on the housing ladder. And the big thing about it is it's nothing from the government, because it's people who pay the tax who get it back. So if you don't pay the tax, you can only get the equivalent over 4 years of the tax that you've paid, up to a maximum of €30,000. So that amount of money that you're getting is only tax that you pay to the government anyhow. But to make price differences in properties, they could do with taking off the VAT off the property, because somebody buys a property and they pay 13% VAT on the property. That person has to get a mortgage to buy that property. So they're paying back that VAT to the government over the next 30 years. And it really doesn't make much sense for governments that want to get housing built and want to get young people into properties. One would imagine that that's the first place that they would start. But I suppose overall, house prices are moving on. There's no doubt about that. They've moved on this year by 10%. And we forecast that in the very beginning of the year. And we're there at the moment in, I think according to some of the most recent reports, they're up to maybe 10% in September or October. But and those prices are seemingly, they're going to stay like that until such time as something happens worldwide, that there's a major sort of calamity or something happens, or else that there's more stock in the marketplace.
Absolutely, and who knows?
That seems to be the answer.
Yeah, and that's it. And who knows what might come there. But, Pat Davitt, thank you. Time is running out now, but thank you again for always a comprehensive analysis. Much more to discuss on that, I think, over time too, even around to that whole right to housing and a home in the Constitution, and how we can do it, and the retrofitting programme, and unlocking the potential of so many houses. But thank you to everybody for your text this morning. Lots of really interesting questions there, and texts coming in, particularly for the different parties and the different candidates as well. One texter has said all parties and none should send a laminated list of their promises to every house, and that way they can't water them down when they get what they want, i.e. our trust. Well, the main thing is use your vote next Friday. You have a voice, you have a vote, get out and use it. Continue listening to Midlands 103 there. You'll hear from the other candidates, the remaining candidates in Laois Offaly and Longford Westmeath over the coming week. And this time next week, we'll be having a look at hopefully exit polls and tallies. Anyway, Lorraine McCormick is here next. I'll talk to you all soon. Big thanks to Nelly. Take care. Have a good weekend.
Saturday View, with thanks to Longcloon Energy, pioneering innovation, powering progress. LongcloonEnergy.com.
Midlands 103.